Oh shit, I have to hit record on this thing too. Welcome to episode Fuck. Let me redo that again. Jesus.
Wow.
That's why we can edit it out. Welcome to episode 30 of the Civil War Breakfast Club. I am your host, Mary, and I am joined by my host, Darren Weeks, who is one of the most awesome Civil War nerds I know. And I am half-assing this intro, as I always do, much like what happens at the Battle of Bentonville.
Wow. I never took us 3 takes through the intro before. Wow. Congratulations. Wow. Life begins at 30, and this is episode 30. Holy crap. But that was quite the intro, Mary. I'll be honest. It was very touching. Thank you.
It's very touching.
It was. It was a very
like I always do.
Yeah, the emotions ran high with that intro. That was really, really good. That really brought the feels. Anyway,
there will come a day when you're not going to let me do the intro. You'll be like, I actually would be totally okay if you just did the intro because.
Look at you getting a responsibility. This way, like you are at that damn ice cream machine up there at the old Kim Card DQ, trying to get out of my responsibility.
Hey,
anyway,
when you're management.
Exactly. No one pushes those 15 year-old kids more than you. But anyway, how are you? How's everything going? A new podcast. Today we're going a little more east. We're talking North Carolina today.
Yep.
So how you been? How was your week?
Good. How about you?
Oh, worked out swimmingly. Perfect. Absolutely awesome.
Our second podcast where we can drink again as well.
It is.
So what are you drinking tonight?
Oh, I'm drinking from the local Knockabout Brewery here in beautiful Cape Cod, Massachusetts. It's called Campfire, and I will be drinking it out of my North Civil War Champions mug. Nice. Because that's who wins this battle, and I don't have anything North Carolina related.
Nice. I don't have anything. Well, I guess I kind of do have something North Carolina related. I do have my mug with Sherman's staff on it. So
and I got a couple of Patriots Super Bowl 38 champion stuff I could have bought it theoretically, but I guess I can just leave that out of it.
Well, I've got O.O. Howard on here and Slocum, okay. Jefferson C. Davis, and Uncle Blingy. They're all at Battle of Bentonville, which we're going to be talking about today. But I am drinking from a local brewery as well. I'm drinking Shut-In IPA, which is by Square Brew, located here in beautiful Goderich, Ontario.
Very nice. Very nice. Nothing better than being shut in, as we are, of course, an annual anniversary here of this pandemic.
I know, but also the important thing too is to support local businesses, right? So I've been
that is true.
By supporting the local beer economy, apparently for the last year.
We're both drinking local beer, and you've been drinking that local beer every single day for the last 365 days. So you certainly have.
Especially since I met you, Weeks.
Yeah, well, I don't blame you. I don't blame you at all with that. Anyway, welcome to the club. So we're going to talk a little bit about Bentonville here in a little bit, but I'm just putting the finishing bows on this last one. Put a bow on last. We talked last week about a bunch of different things. We had a great live. We had when this thing drops on Saturday, we'll be less than a week away from our St. Patty's Day trivia contest that we're going to be doing, as well as our get together. So that'll be a lot of fun. We have a lot of stuff to catch up on. So anyway, so we're going to talk a little bit today about the Battle of Bentonville, which is really the last leg of Uncle Blingy's March to the Sea.
Yep, we're going to talk about. So it's part 2 of our episode about the Carolinas campaign. So there will be a third part in April, which will talk about the rest of what happens to Joseph E. Johnston and his quote unquote army, if you can really call it that, after the Battle of Bentonville, as well as the surrender and some stuff in between that too. So this series, I guess, if we can call it that, is going to be the first threesome.
Okay.
You go silent.
Wow. Once again, you're embarrassing the children. So anyway, Battle of Bentonville, we'll jump right into this one here real quick. So real big picture is the last real full-scale battle of a Civil War, which is where the Rebs really tried to mount an offensive. And it was their only real attempt really in this entire march to try to beat Sherman through the Carolinas, really. It was, and we'll talk more in the details about how much that effort really, really was. While this is going on, Grant is outside of Petersburg. He's got the whole city surrounded, and he wants Sherman to come up there and help him beat Lee. He wants him to come on up here and do it. He wants him to jump on a boat of all things and come all the way around and get off and kind of help him. But he has another plan. Sherman, they've been very 2 peas in a pod, Sherman and Grant. But this is the one time he kind of disagrees with Grant, and he says, "Listen, I'm going to stay down here and I'm going to take out the supplies. I'm going to take out the railroad. It's the same thing. This way I don't got to go up there. I can just kind of deal with it directly. But it's going to be a big battle. I mean, this Bentonville is going to be the largest battle ever in North Carolina. But you know something, Mary? North Carolina, in my opinion, gets the shit end of the stick in the Civil War. And I'll tell you, because they had just as many deaths as Virginians did.
They did.
But you don't know that. And there's an old saying that North Carolina did all the work and Virginia got all the credit, right? And when it comes to the Civil War, it's kind of true. They both had over 30,000 deaths as far as the Civil War goes, just in their states, tied for the highest in the Confederacy. So they put in a lot of effort. But, you know, the Virginians got to write the story. So there's still a lot of animosity between Virginia and North Carolina. And you saw that with the monuments, especially places like Gettysburg, right?
Mm-hmm, exactly.
When that was coming out. So, but this is interesting though, because Sherman, you know, this is going back to him. When we last saw old Uncle Blingy, he was down and leaving Columbia after really disappointing Smokey the Bear by not following his rules with the city of Columbia. And
Howard has to deal with it.
And Howard had to deal with it, exactly. But you know, Grant, like I said, he wants to connect in Petersburg to fight Lee. And because really what Petersburg is really being sustained by the materials that are being delivered from Wilmington, North Carolina, which are coming through England basically, but that's really the last open port that the Rebs have is Wilmington. And they're taking the supplies, they're setting up the Wilmington-Weldon Railroad that runs north from Wilmington, and it's really their main supply route to Petersburg, right? So Sherman says, listen, how about I just cut the friggin' supplies? I'm here. I got nothing else to do. So they're going to cut the supplies and try to bleed the Rebs out is what they're going to really do. They're going to march through their country just like before, live off the land. And they're going to really hurt the rebel economy and their will. And then that's pretty much what he really wants to do is this early part of this campaign.
Yep. And they, so like he's leaving Columbia and he tells Grant though, like when Grant wants him to come up by boat, he's like, no, that's going to take too long. I want to keep going. Like, you know, I want to go over by land. And that's why he does this Columbia campaign. So he has with him 60,000 troops and it's still Howard and Slocum commanding his wing. So my boy, Oliver Otis Howard, is commanding the right wing. And he's actually the one that is put in charge at Columbia. He's kind of like the adult in the room there, as we said in the last episode about the Carolinas campaign. And Slocum is going to be leading the left wing of these troops. But the Confederates is where it starts to get really very piecemeal, I guess you could say. And this is the thing with studying the Carolinas campaign that I learned in researching this episode. It really hit me again, just if you want to look at how broken things were, how done clearly the generals were with the Civil War, and they knew that the cause was lost. Just look at the Carolinas campaign and what Joseph Johnston has to throw together when he is called back into command on February the 22nd, 1865. Yeah.
It's like, hey, I got a new car. Okay. It's a BMW. You go, oh wow, that's really good. It's got a great reputation. Then you come over and you find out it's a 1988 BMW. It's all bondoed, held together with tape, but it's still a BMW, right? That's what this army is. So they basically have the Army of the Tennessee, which just got their ass riddled up at Franklin, right? Yep. And you got the Department of North Carolina. We'll talk about the guys running this in a little bit. And that Department of South Carolina, Georgia, Florida. You got some cavalry too. But what you have is a hodgepodge of army guys who just, they're a shell of themselves. They got about 22,000 guys right in that thing. But this isn't the Army of the Tennessee that we knew heading into Franklin. It certainly isn't. And this isn't Braxton Bragg's army we saw at Chattanooga or Chickamauga. This is a skeleton crew. And so, you know, we'll talk more about that going through. But on paper, it's Johnson's last hope, and he knew they didn't have much of a shot. But basically, Sherman, and we'll talk more about Sherman because he's got his problems in this Carolina campaign too, because he's kind of running out of gas a little bit too, right? You know, we talked a little bit about that. We'll talk more about it. So Sherman, you know, he's going to leave. He's leaving Columbia before he gets up to Bentonville, which is going to be our goal of this podcast. He's going to hit Fayetteville first, right? And he's going to basically. This is a town full of arsenals. It's a lot. Like the Meridian campaign. It's a town that's got a lot of supplies, a lot of war making capability. He wants to wreck it because that's what he wants to do. Because now it's the supplies. So there's a quote that says, that somebody said down in Fayetteville. It said Sherman stayed 5 days, but his impact lingered for a decade. So he went to town. The citizens got roughed up. The military mocked the locals by playing Dixie everywhere they went. And this is the 14th Corps, naturally, the way it always is. But they destroyed the arsenals. They did all kinds of damage. And basically what they did is they just left the city as a complete shell of itself. They just messed the whole thing up. And it really affected them. Over in Wilmington, and we're going to talk about the other side a little bit. We're not going to talk a lot about Wilmington and Fort Fisher. We're going to save that for another day. But just to touch on it real quick. So the Army's taken Fort Fisher in January of 1865. So this is a little bit before. This is an 11-day siege of Wilmington, which is about 30 miles up the river from Fort Fisher. It finally falls on February 22nd. This is when Braxton Bragg evacuates. He YOLOs, he takes off. But they burn the cotton bills. They do the traditional burn everything before they leave. But, what it does is it gives Sherman that potential supply base for the Navy, because he can connect now to Wilmington if he wants it. There's a guy named General Alfred Terry who's really in charge, but he's just taken forever. He finally gets replaced by our old friend John Schofield, married from Franklin, right? And he's going to begin to finally leave Wilmington, and he's going to move his way inland, because what he wants to do is he wants to hook up with some troops from New Bern, right? And he wants to slowly make his way to a place called Goldsboro to meet up with Sherman. And from there, what they're going to do is either going to go to Raleigh and they're going to chase Johnston, or if that doesn't work out, then they're going to try to work about getting over to Grant. So, but that's really, in a nutshell, what the plan is. So you got Schofield coming from the east, you got Sherman coming from the south going east, and they're all going to connect in Goldsboro. And that's really what the plan is. And what Joseph Johnston wants to do is he wants to make a fight. He wants to this is his last chance. He wants to stop Sherman here, because he knows this is pretty much it. So he's going to try to delay that Goldsboro meeting. He's going to try to stop them there for the Confederacy. And that's what Lee wants him to do. He wants to keep Sherman away from Virginia.
Yeah. And Sherman, again, has 60,000 troops with him. Johnston is only going to have 21,000 with him. That is what he's managed to piece together from basically 3 different places. And just a little bit about Johnston. He went to West Point with Robert E. Lee, graduated the same year in 1829. They're classmates. And he had commanded the Confederates at Manassas, and he's actually wounded at the same battle as Oliver Otis Howard is. And then he goes out to the Western Theater again, and he's removed he's there until July 7th, 1864, when Davis is basically like, "You're fucking done, dude." What are you grinning about?
I just love how you get Howard. It's all his.
I do.
It's just so funny. But I know, but sometimes I see it coming, sometimes I don't. This time I didn't see it coming.
So, how could you not? They're wounded.
I don't know, because I'm going to get to them later. But yeah, okay. So
then February 22nd, 1865, he takes command of what will become the Army of the South, as he calls it. He's told, and he actually tells somebody after he finds out about it, that he's afraid he's been given command of an army just to be the general that would surrender it. So this is something that, first of all, Johnston does not really want. But secondly, he sees the bigger picture that this war is winding down, it's done, and he probably does not want any more bloodshed. And he's got to gather together troops from all across the South. So the orders that he gets from Lee on February 23rd are to concentrate all of their available forces and drive back Sherman. So it's not to defeat Sherman or destroy him, it's drive him back. Basically, this is like, just see if you can delay him, because I think even at this point, he knows, like, they're done,
It's a speed bump. He's trying to put a speed bump in. Is all he's trying to do. Try to what really delay the inevitable. Delay the inevitable. Holy God! But basically,
we'll just edit that one out.
Oh, thank you. Okay. So you've got these two armies kind of converging, right? So Schofield's coming from, he's coming from the Wilmington area. March 7th, he's going to basically be heading up. He's going to bump into Bragg in Kinston, at a place called the Battle of Wise Forks, what the battle's going to be called. And he's going to be with Jacob Cox. And basically what he's going to ultimately do is he's going to really just go ahead and fight him there. It's not going to be much of really that big of a battle, but it's just going to be one of those times they connect. So Kinston ultimately falls on March 14th. And Schofield at that point is going to begin to advance on Bentonville from the east. Because again, he wants to meet up with Sherman and Goldsboro, who's coming up from Fayetteville. And really what they want to do in Goldsboro is they want to consolidate. They want to kind of have a meeting and just get together, resupply, consolidate their armies and kind of put the whole band together and then decide what they're going to do, like we said before, about Raleigh with Johnson or going up to Richmond. The Rebs at this point, to your point a few minutes ago, they're a mess. They're beaten.
They are.
That Army of Tennessee we talked about, they're completely messed up in a battle we talked about in a previous podcast and never really should have been even fought.
Yeah,
so you wonder how this could have been different if Claiborne was still alive and just states' rights, Chris Gist was still alive, and a lot of these things have still played itself out. But Johnston's trying to stay in contact with, like he's trying to stay in contact with Sherman. He knows he can't do much. He just wants to screen him. He just wants to he knows he can't do much, but he just wants to be there and just kind of slow him down.
He just tells Lee I can do nothing more than annoy him.
Right.
So it's like swatting at a fly, I think.
Exactly.
Is what it is.
Yeah, things get annoying. You just want to whack, try and how that is, So on the other side, Sherman's pushing through North Carolina. So we're talking about March 10th now. So we're getting close to the battle here. So Sherman's pushing towards North Carolina. He's got Judson Kilpatrick's cavalry basically screening on his left. And they end up in a place called Monroe's Crossroads, which ironically is kind of near the site of Fort Bragg today, Mary, the same general area. And Kilpatrick's going to bump into Wade Hampton's cavalry. And Hampton's cavalry is going to basically catch the Fed sleeping here. He's going to get them. They're all going to be in camp. But it's not going to work out too well. They are going to eventually get pushed back. But this is what it is. They're just being aggravating. They don't have the horses, literally and figuratively, to beat them, right? So they're just going to basically kind of continue to do that. Meanwhile, they're just going to keep marching and marching and marching. The Union eventually is going to still be heading towards Goldsboro. They want to still link up with Schofield. And, this is when it kind of heats up a little bit, right? So Slocum, he's marching up towards Raleigh, right? And this is when Kilpatrick, he's doing a little recon. He's gonna bump into Hardy. He's gonna see the camp, and he's gonna basically go back to Slocum and say, "Hey, fucking guys are here, right?" So Kilpatrick's is gonna ask for help. They're gonna set up Alpheus Williams from the 20th Corps, and eventually, they're gonna fight. They're going to get beaten back, but then Jefferson C. Davis is going to get involved in his 14th Corps. They're going to force Hardy to retreat that night, but it's going to be that consistent fight, run, but it's slowing them down, right?
Yeah. It's very similar to what happens in the Atlanta campaign.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's very, very similar. Johnston, he's deciding he's going to, he wants to gather them together. At this point, he's like, let's gather together for one last hurrah. Let's see what we can do. So they're going to meet up at a place called Smithfield, North Carolina, rather. I almost messed that one up. And what they're going to do is they're going to basically try and beat Sherman if they can. They know they really can't, but they're going to try. And if they can, then they'll go for Schofield as they're approaching Goldsboro. But here's the mistake he makes, Mary. And this is a thing where they misunderstood the numbers. We mentioned before that Sherman's got 60,000 guys. He's got literally an army, right? Johnson only thinks he's got 35,000 guys. So he's like, well, I've only got 20 or so thousand. I'm outnumbered, but I don't think it's that bad. And that's a gigantic mistake he makes because he's got this army of the South. It's not in great shape. It's not a huge number, but it's somewhat, it's not completely a mess. He's got the old Tennessee guys, the Carolina guys, the Georgia, South Carolina, Florida, but he misreads the numbers. The other thing he does is he screws up the map, right? So he's got those cheap mobile gas station maps that are from 1980 that have all the wrong roads on them.
Same thing that Sherman had at Missionary Ridge.
Exactly, probably a 2-for-1 deal. That's probably what happened, right? So he knows that Sherman's army is divided. He knows he's got Owo coming on one side. He's got Slocum on the other, right? But he thinks they're a lot further apart than they really are. And so he wants to beat them in detail. He thinks maybe I can go after one and then maybe go after the other one before they connect. he's going to decide he's going to focus on Slocum. And so he does. So, he's thinking, well, go at him, try to beat him, try to get their supplies, because he knows he's got this superhero all over Otis Howard coming. And he wants no part of him, right? Because he knows he's going to come and save the day. I've seen the picture with him with the shirt. He's going to save the day.
So what's going to happen is that on March 16th, there's going to be the Battle of Verisboro. Am I saying that right?
Easy for you to say.
And what happens here is Johnston is going to put in 2 divisions and create like a delaying action. And there's 3 Confederate battle lines, but the Union manages to just break them. And Kilpatrick comes up against Hardee's Corps here, and he ends up calling for support, and he gets support from the 20th Corps. And they manage to, the Confederates are driven from 2 lines of their works, but then they're repulsed at the 3rd line. And then Hardee just is like, fuck this, and retreats for whatever reason. But this is where Johnson realizes that they're separated by 2 lines.
Right.
But where he has the bad maps.
It is. And so it does exactly. And so right off the bat, you've got bad numbers, you've got bad intel, you've got bad maps, you got the whole deal. You got to see where this is going. But again, he's I don't know if he thought I still got the great Army of Tennessee. Maybe I do, but he clearly does. And so, you're approaching Bentonville now. And so it's March 19th, right? Johnston decides, okay, we're going to attack right at dawn. Okay. Slocum is going to be marching along the Goldsboro Road just south of Bentonville, and he's going to set up his army. So Johnston's going to have Robert Hoke, his division from the Army of Northern Virginia, who we mentioned before would have been at Gettysburg, but he got hurt at Fredericksburg and ended up being Avery, who got killed on East Cemetery Hill. And he's going to be basically he's going to be there. And then you're going to have Bragg's division, North Carolina, on the rebel left. You have Alexander Stewart from the Army of Tennessee. He's going to be in that rebel right. But Hardee's also there too. They're going to set up that army kind of like I don't know what you call it, like what are those things? A sickle? Those things? As I'm moving my hand, like you can see.
Well, I think like there's
it's not a salient,
yes.
Right?
Yeah,
it's like a circle. It's like a half of a basketball. That's how it's set up. Like a crescent, exactly, like a crescent. So it's set up like a crescent.
Corps?
Yeah, like the 11th Corps. But he sets it up like a crescent on the Goldsboro Road.
Yeah,
that's and they're facing west with their backs towards that Nussey River. And I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but that's what I'm going to call it. And Slocum right on target, 7 o'clock in the morning on the 19th. He's going to come bumbling down the road. And they're going to be bumped into the rebel cavalry, the same cavalry that was bothering them on their foraging missions earlier. But, he's going to basically come on a heavy fire very, very quickly. Now, he's going to have Jefferson Davis's 14th Corps with him. He's going to have Clark's division, guys from Michigan, Ohio, and Illinois, and those places. And they're going to come out of that heavy fire. Now Slocum's surprised. Probably one, that he was on time because it was Slocum. But second of all, he's surprised because he thinks the rebel army is still in Raleigh. He thinks they're not even near there. So this is almost like a little Gettysburg situation. Know what he does though? They catch 3 rebel deserters, and this is where you get lucky, right? They catch 3 deserters, and they say, "Hey, just so you know, Slocum, Johnson's full army is right in your front. They're not in Raleigh, so they're right there, right? They're pointed, right?" And so Slocum at this point is going to request reinforcements. He's going to say, "All right, well, okay," but they're going to get pushed back because they're going to come out of that heavy fire that we mentioned before. So he's going to set up his army in defensive style. He's going to have a guy named William Carlin on his left, James Morgan, his 2nd Division on his right-hand side, with Alpheus Williams' 20th Corps in support. So now we're coming around to noontime. And when you're in these battles, you don't have time to play defense like Greene did at Gettysburg, right? When you come under assault quickly, you have no time to build breastwork. So they're kind of exposed. They are recklessly exposed, as they say, Mary. Okay. Meanwhile, the Rebs are getting more and more reinforcements coming themselves. So now you've got guys like Lafayette McLaws coming from Hardee's division, along with Telefiero's division. So the numbers are starting to add up. Now, again, the Rebs are very under the gun with numbers, but at this moment, it's not, right? You've got Slocum's, you've got basically Slocum up against this growing army. The Army of Tennessee is going to be there. They're going to push ahead pretty quickly. Carl, I mentioned, almost gets caught. This is that part of the battle, really. We have that battle at the bullpen, which is really brutal. You know, every one of these battles, you got the Hornet's Nest at Shiloh, and you got the Mule's Shoe at Spotsylvania. This is in that vein. So this is a hand-to-hand type combat. The Fed line's a complete disarray. It's going to break. But this is some of the most vicious fighting of any of the Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
That line defended by James Morgan, guys at the 14th Michigan, 60th Illinois. They're gonna be basically fighting guys from the 54th Virginia, the 40th North Carolina, 26th Tennessee. They're gonna be basically getting at it. And there was a really good quote by one of the soldiers in the Union, actually a Confederate. He said, "I look back, the Federals had risen up behind the bullpen as thick as black burbs on a horse law fence." Guy named Private Hathaway, the 54th Virginia. So right off the bat, you knew right off the bat. And then there was a Union soldier who said the onward sweep of the rebel lines was like the waves of an ocean, resistless. So right here, it's probably one of the ugliest parts of this battle that, again, Slocum didn't expect. He didn't see coming because he didn't know where they were.
Yeah, exactly. He didn't. And like, it's like sometimes like some of the stuff that I read about this battle said like the first and second day are basically just skirmishing because this battle is going to go until it's 19th, 20th, and 21st. But this is, you know, it's clearly more than skirmishing at times. And it continues until midnight, which is pretty late. And that's finally when the Confederates are just, okay, we're done. You know, like DHL doesn't come in and attack until around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, which this time of the year, you know, you don't have that much daylight left. And so he's going to attack, and then the fighting continues until almost midnight.
It does. You know, guys at Telefair and Bates, I mentioned from the Tennessee, you know, they're attacking the Federal line at the Harper House. They're right there. They're pushing them back. The Feds are able to repulse the rebel attack, though. And it gets, to your point, it gets late. But again, on both sides, Lieutenant Heath, 34th Illinois, he says, "We saw nothing in 4 years of Army life to compare with that of the 19th of March at Bentonville." So it's pretty brutal. Later the 19th, right before bedtime, Sherman sends a message for Howard and says, "You better get up here. We need to come down from Krypton and save the day here."
Yeah, and that's when Howard he does come down, and he actually writes that Johnston in this battle, like on the 3 days of Bentonville, that he does something that was similar to Fair Oaks, which would be probably ingrained in Howard's mind because that's where Howard lost his arm. He said that he struck a portion of the Union Army temporarily isolated, and he hoped to crush it before our troops could be brought back. So Johnston is trying to deploy the same types of strategies that he does here. But Howard does get word that he needs to move up. And so that's where he starts making his way on March 20th. And he says that the terrain is not very good at this battlefield. Like there's so much more, he said in his memoirs, there's so much more open woodland than open ground in the vicinity of Bentonville, and so much marshy or spongy soil that quick maneuvering was impossible. So he arrives, but it's not until late afternoon to reinforce Slocum on March 20th. And the Confederates are now definitely outnumbered. And there's not really, like Howard says, when he's bringing his troops into position, there's no real battle going on. It's just skirmishing that day. But he talks to Slocum, and Slocum says of the day before, "We whipped them."
Yeah, well, they did push him back. You know, Howard, he rolls in, I assume him riding on a horse, probably Fabio style with his hair blowing in the sunshine. You know, but he's going to get there. He's going to get there like mid-afternoon. He's going to set up on Slocum's right. He's going to extend that Federal line down to Mill Creek. So Johnston, in his position, he's going to set up his army, Mighty Duck style, on a flying V. That's how he's going to have it.
Love that movie.
Great movie, you know. Soft hands. And so that's how they're going to set up that army. But by 4 o'clock, most of Howard's guys are in Bentonville. So most of them are there. I think they'd be able to run there faster for being one of Howard's guys. But then in case, took a while.
Maybe they didn't get the contract with Nike again.
The switch, yeah. But so Johnston, you know, he wants to make his numbers look bigger because now he knows what's going on. So he has his cavalry on the flanks. He's spreading his guys out. And it actually kind of works. So what he actually confuses Sherman, because now Sherman's like, wait a second, how many guys does this freaking guy have? So he's confused now how many numbers that Johnston actually has. So he decides this is where we're going to talk about a couple of mistakes here. Old Uncle Blingy here makes.
Yeah,
This
on
is
the
the first one.
21st,
Okay,
the next day.
he has the opportunity to attack and order a general attack, but he doesn't. He decides what he's going to do. He wants to order one of his subordinates. We'll talk about him in a little bit to basically to probe the rebel lines to see what they got. And at this point, the Rebs, you have Hoke's division with Stewart on the right, and and on the flank you've got some of Hardy's divisions, and they're setting up this defensive style. Now, this you say what you will about Joseph Johnston, Mary, but the guy learned, right? He set up a defensive line and sat there because you know what he wants? He wants Sherman to attack like at Kennesaw.
Exactly. He wanted
right?
Sherman to do the Kennesaw thing again, and Sherman
Exactly.
is just like, Sherman's
So
like, fuck that.
He's sitting there going, "Yep, come at me, bro. Come at me, bro." Right? Yep. And so Sherman's like, "Oh, okay, but my spidey sense is going off here a little bit. So how about we don't?" So, but Sherman's also thinking, you know what? It's getting late on the 20th. I bet you he's going to leave in the morning. I bet you he's going to take off because I just have a feeling. So he goes to bed. He wakes up on the 21st, and guess what? Johnson's still there.
Yep, he's moved out his wounded men, but that's it.
He's still. But then the other thing that comes is it's pouring out. It is frigging pouring, like deluge rain that whole day, and so that's slowing everything down too. So that subordinate we talked about is a guy named Joseph Mowers. Okay, Vermonter, Red Sox fan.
Yeah,
he was part of the First Corps, and he's part of the 17th Corps. I mean, the 17th Corps in the First Division under Francis Blair. He's going to go out and he's going to reconnoiter the area, but it's pouring out, so it takes him forever.
He's also the next fighting. He's also the other fighting Joe.
He is fighting Joe 2.0. And so he does go out, Maurer, and he does find a weak point in the rebel line. Okay, he does. And so he's like, well, what do? I better attack. Even though he's told to reconnoiter, he YOLOs and he goes straight forward. So he's going to attack that rebel left flank. And he's going to keep pushing forward, and he's going to get about a mile away from the bridge. That's where he's trying to attack. The goal. He's going to get a mile away. He's got the momentum, and guess what happens?
Sherman's like, "Can you get the fuck back here?"
Sherman says, "Stop." He calls off the attack. Must have broke his heart.
I can't. Yeah, and this is like. Sherman said General Mower Everrash broke through the rebel line on the extreme left flank and was pushing straight for Bentonville and the bridge across Mill Creek. I ordered him back to connect with his own corps, and lest the enemy should concentrate on him, ordered the whole rebel line to be engaged with strong skirmish fire.
And this is, he's got guys. There's like the 4th Tennessee and the 8th Texas Cavalry. That's all he's really got. And Sherman will later admit. I mean, in his books, he literally quotes, "I fucked up." That's literally what it says. Don't even bother checking it. That's what he said. But he knows he screwed up because he knows he could have bagged Johnson's entire army probably right there. He probably could have. Then there's that story with William Hardy's kid, which I know you like to tell because you like these gruesome stories.
Yeah. So Hardy's son, who's about 16 years old, is he's at this battle with his dad, and he joins up with a regiment of Texas cavalry, and he goes into where Mower is, and he ends up getting killed. And he's still, when his dad sees him, he's still alive, but he dies later. Howard actually writes about this in his memoirs, because the sad thing about this is Howard had been his tutor when he was at West Point. So when Hardy and Howard were at West Point, like Hardy was a commandant or whatever you want to call it at that time, and Howard was associated with him. And Hardy obviously had his son living there at West Point, and Howard would tutor him in various subjects, probably math. Just saying, it probably was math. Maybe, I don't know.
Of course it was.
But anyway, so Howard knew the boy. He was friends with Hardy, and he found out from Stephen D. Lee that Hardy's son had been killed in this battle.
It's part of the 8th Texas Cavalry.
Yeah, 16 years old, which probably for like Hardy at this point, I think is done with the war, and he's kind of, I wouldn't want to say half-assing it, but just kind of like, we don't need to fight any more than we need to. And he does very reluctantly say to his son, okay, you can go with them, because he probably thinks like, this is not really going to be a big fight. But I think Franklin was what started to make Hardy question what was going on, but this was probably what was like, okay, we're done with this. My 16-year-old boy has been killed, you know.
This was this was over. This whole thing was over. So night on the 21st finally comes, and Johnston decides he's going to pull out. He's going to go across that Mill Creek. He's going to burn the bridge. And Sherman, it's funny because the night before, Sherman expected him to retreat. But then when Johnston does finally pull out, Sherman's unaware of it. It actually surprises him. And so he didn't pursue him. He just kind of let him go. He chose to continue that march to Goldsboro, right? So instead of chasing Johnston, who goes off back towards Raleigh, he's going to keep going, and he's going to leave, and he's going to go to Goldsboro. He does meet up with Joe at Schofield. He's going to get there on the 23rd of March. And then they kind of sit and they kind of chill. And so they're sitting in Goldsboro and they're resting. They're getting their supplies. Ironically, Mary, you know what they were going for? They were for shoes. How funny is that? They really were, And so, well, I don't know if there was an ass factory or not, but there was shoes, but they were going for shoes.
Well, apparently Howard was not wearing the Nikes, so they were available.
Well, I guess Sherman noticed a lot of the Confederates are barefoot. And so he says, we better get shoes, And so we did. And so he basically, we'll tell them more of the rest of the stories that go on, but eventually he does chase Johnston down towards Raleigh. He does catch him, and they get to the Bennett house that he on the 26th of April when he surrenders, all that. But the thing about this though is it's a weird battle to study, because it's got so many guys and so many divisions and so many brigades and so many regiments, but there's not a lot of activity. The 19th is the big day. But you know what? We've talked a lot about talking about Sherman with the March to the Sea, right? About how it was very seamless. It was a very battle. But this is where he kind of trips and falls on his face on this one, right? Because it was a Union victory by definition. They pushed him off the field, but he made two gigantic mistakes.
He did.
Right. The first one we talked about, obviously, he failed to support Joseph Mauer on that last day. For whatever reason, and we've talked about a million reasons why. He just sick of fighting. He just assumed it was over. He just didn't want to. But for whatever reason, he chose not to. Not to the point where he didn't tell him not to fight, but he got him to the point where he had him over a barrel and then stopped him.
Yeah, exactly. He's within 1 mile, and he could have bagged it. And Sherman actually says in his memoirs, I think I made a mistake there and should rapidly have followed Mauer's lead with the whole of the right, which would have brought on a general battle, and it could have resulted otherwise than successfully to us by reason of our vastly superior numbers. But at the moment, for the reasons given, I preferred to make junction with General Terry and Schofield before engaging Johnston's army, the strength which was utterly unknown. So he's saying, I didn't know his numbers. Howard, in his memoirs, says of what the decision that Sherman made, that none of these reasons satisfied me at the time, but events were already ripening, which very soon made me glad that this was the last battle which had not been pushed to the extremity. So recognizing that, not more people were killed. And I'm wondering if Howard's writing this after, so he's thinking, my God, like Hardy's boy at 16 was killed in this part of the battle. How many more boys like that might have been lost?
Well, we were talking before about how I think everybody after Atlanta, for the most part, knew this hunt's over, right? It's over, right? Especially after Franklin. And I think at that point, it gets to a point when is going to be just unnecessary death at this point.
Yeah.
And Sherman, for everything you say about Sherman, he definitely took his foot off the gas. He ends up going over, to meet with Lincoln and to Grant. And a lot of stuff happens before they finally surrender. But I think the funny part about this is we talked throughout Sherman's march about all the good decisions he made and all the bad ones Johnston had made off and on, right? Going back to Meridian, going back to, just not having Georgia defended, giving up South Carolina so quickly. In the biggest final battle ever fought in North Carolina, in the largest real big battle of the Civil War, Sherman wins but looks bad. Johnston loses but looks good, right? it's just kind of funny how life is humorous sometimes with that.
It is. But I'm wondering too, if this was really, if you can consider what he did with Maurer and a mistake, because when you look at Hardy's boy at the age of 16 getting killed, if Sherman had said, do it, how many more lives would have been lost? And would have been, you think like the Civil War at this point it's a month from quote unquote ending, right?
Well, Maurer was supposed to do a recon mission too. That was the other
but he
thing.
just is like, fuck it, I'm gonna attack. But Sherman had said of him earlier, he's the fucking most boldest guy I've got.
Yeah, and he went around, and he went right at Johnson's headquarters too. Right in Mill Creek there, went right at it.
Yeah,
he had guys like 25th Indiana and the 32nd Wisconsin, 39th Ohio. He had some good guys that he went with, and there was really no defense. There was really nobody there to stop them. Like we mentioned before, the 4th Tennessee and those 8 Texans, and there was really nothing to it. But at the end of the day, what did Johnston do? He did delay Sherman. He delayed the inevitable. So I guess if you're looking at what your ultimate long goals were, right? I know you have that quote that you wanted to read about that Johnston had said, but what was his ultimate goal in North Carolina? He kept the cities from being burned, right?
Yep.
But he did delay them, and he delayed the inevitable. He never had any misconceptions about ever beating Sherman. But you know what? He gave it a shot and did it just enough to slow him down.
Exactly. And I mean, at this time, as you said, I've got the quote that I want to read that I found in Howard's memoirs, which was one from Johnston that, Johnston at this point is in a mindset where the war is all but lost. And he is fighting with an army. It's 3 different armies basically thrown together. The Army of Tennessee, what he gets from them is 4,500 men. That's it. It's just an army in name, basically, compared to what it had been at Franklin, Nashville, Chickamauga, Chattanooga. Johnson said that of this part of the campaign, that this was done with the full consciousness of my part, however, that we could have no other object with continuing the war than to obtain fair terms of peace, for the Southern cause must have appeared hopeless than to all the intelligent and dispassionate Southern men. So the cause is done. And I think what he's doing with that too is he is throwing a little bit of shade at Jefferson Davis and saying, you're still trying to keep this going and it's done,
He was, and there was a lot of shade going on. And and I don't know if you know this, Mary, but I have a Howard quote for you.
Ooh.
I know. So we talked before about how these guys talk about each other. Howard was somebody who did not come out impressed after this with Sherman.
No, he didn't.
Right. So he says, and I quote, "Ahem. Strategy was his strong point. Take him in battle, and he did not seem to be the equal of Thomas nor Grant." Oh. So he'll get you ready. He's a great game day guy. Once the game starts, he pees down his leg. That's what Howard is saying. And you know what? He's kind of true.
He's right. When I read that, I've read a similar quote in his memoirs, and it's
probably was that quote. That's where I got it from.
It was something. That's exactly what it was. That's exactly what it was.
I read something similar in Howard's memoir.
No, it wasn't that. Anyway, no, he definitely does not see Sherman as being like this guy when he gets into battle where he's like, let's go.
Can't you let me have my Howard quote? Can't you just let me have one?
I'm letting you have it.
Anyway, but again, Sherman, there's a reason why Johnston sat back in that flying V waiting to get attacked like Kennesaw, right? Yeah. And you could say what you about Sherman, one of the best generals the country ever had, but he did have a tendency to kind of fumble the ball from time to time. And he did on this. He won the battle. He did what he was supposed to do. He got to Goldsboro. We met with Schofield. He ultimately caught Johnston. The Bennett House got him to surrender. He did every single goal. He checked off every single box that he wanted to do on his march to the sea. But when you look at this battle, and he even admitted himself in those memoirs, he could have had Johnston. He could have had him. He could have supported Maurer. He just stopped. It sounds a lot to me like Hooker lost confidence in Joe Hooker to me, doesn't it? A little bit.
That's exactly
Now,
what it sounds like.
But again, it's tough to say what he was thinking at the time. I think Johnston would become friends later in life with Sherman to the point when they were at their funeral together. We talked about the whole story with the hat and the pneumonia. But I wonder, to your point, if Sherman realized, if I chase him down, more guys are going to die, and it's just not worth it. It's a big waste of time. So we'll never know. But he did admit that he screwed that up. So who knows exactly what it was. But at that time, for whatever reason, and I've never read why he never admitted why he stopped, except that he was a mistake that he did. But he did stop, and he did let them go on for a couple more weeks. It ultimately didn't matter, because Johnston will end up being caught. He will surrender eventually. The terms will be a little different because Lincoln's going to get assassinated along the way, and it's going to mess up the plans. But at the end of the day, Sherman's going to get his man. But it seemed like he could have got him earlier. There's no question he could have.
No, absolutely. And you got to wonder why, I think if you read between the lines in this, and this is something you and I do a lot, in doing this podcast and just with, the history of the Civil War in general, I think it does go back to the people that Sherman knew in the South, the friends he had and all that, and it wasn't Johnson at this time. He and Johnson were not familiar with each other until, they met at, when they surrendered, in April, when Johnson surrenders to him in April. That's one of the first times the two of them actually sit down and talk together. But he had other friends in the South, and he was tired of the fighting. But two, you got to wonder, when Howard is saying things like, he's not Thomas and he's not Grant. And Howard has witnessed this at Kennesaw. He knows of what Sherman's done probably at Vicksburg and all that. And I mean, I mean, I'm not just saying this because O is my favorite general. I do agree with him. When it came to battles, that was not Sherman's strong suit. It wasn't. He just kind of, something in him just kind of, he balked a little bit more than somebody like Thomas or Grant did. And I think the march to the sea, though, was where he truly did shine. And this is where, after Bentonville, they get to Goldsboro. And this is where Sherman writes in his memoirs that the march to the sea has ended. And he talks about it as this great, it's been a great achievement, because they managed to, you know, they march how many hundreds of miles through enemy territory. And they just, they take what they need for supplies. The one thing he mentions, though, it's at a limited cost of life.
It is, and they don't even run into their first major battle at the very end.
Exactly.
They make it all the way, right? They make it all the way through Georgia, through South Carolina, through almost all the way through North Carolina. They run into Bentonville, and that was a battle that was just really designed. I mean, obviously, Johnston had the idea, in a perfect world, I'd beat him, and then I'd go beat Schofield, and I'm not sure what he was going to do after that. But they definitely wanted to keep that supply line from the Wilmington Railroad in shape to be able to deliver those materials. But he knew. But again, it ended up being a successful campaign. There's no question. Probably one of the best. I mean, people study it for years. That's why people know Sherman. It's why he's just not another footnote in American history. He's somebody who achieved his goals, was very aggressive, did everything he had to do. Makes me wonder a little bit if there was more defense in Georgia or South Carolina, and he had to fight battles more, how history might have been different. Because he really had run of the yard. He really got to do what he wanted to do. He didn't get beat at Bentonville, but he got pushed a little bit, and he got caught with his pants down a little bit. And even he started to question himself with how many numbers Johnston had. He got a little, he backed, he pulled off at the end. And who knows? At the end of the day, it all worked out for the Army, for the Union. And Johnston, like we said, was captured. But it ends up being a gigantic battle. And it's one that, again, we've said this many, many times, Fincher. It's a battle that people don't study enough. It's a big battle. And I mean, it's not Pea Ridge that we talked about recently, or Franklin, or these really, really spectacular type ones. But it's one, like we said, it's the biggest one ever fought in North Carolina. But it's one that ultimately was the final hurrah for Joseph Johnston and the Confederacy in the East. and they didn't come close to winning it. But you know what? They put up a fight and they did the best they could with what they had, because
Yeah.
that army they had was trash. It was. They had
Yeah, like I
nothing.
mean, at that point, they kind of like both sides kind of are, I think, in a way, like they're sort of half-assing it because they're like, we don't want any more casualties because we know this is ending. It's clear that from that one quote that I read that Johnston knew they were at an end, and I think Sherman did too. I think Howard had that attitude as well. I'm sure Slocum did. Hardy definitely did, especially probably after his child was killed in the battle. But yeah, it was the one thing too about this is, when you hear March to the Sea, you think Atlanta to Savannah, and then it ends. The Carolinas campaign is separate. After studying this, like we have, I see the March to the Sea as being all of this. It goes right to Goldsboro.
Yeah,
That's
it
what
goes right
Sherman
to it.
Sherman Sherman says. Goldsboro was the end of the march. He
Mhm.
uses the term the march. So it's not just Atlanta to Savannah. It's all of this entire campaign. And this is the campaign that is, it breaks the Confederacy. It's the reason why he starts really struggling with supplies because Sherman is ripping up those railways. Morale is going down, and he's breaking the Confederacy using, you know, not just like kind of he's not really waging physical war. It's more of like a mental thing, and he's breaking them by taking their supplies, and he's making it so they can't make war up where
Well,
Lee
there's
is.
no sense in making gunpowder and bullets and cannonballs if you can't deliver it. And so when you take out the Wilmington Weldon Railroad and you can't deliver
Mm-hmm.
it, and that supply line that runs from Wilmington to Petersburg doesn't exist anymore, and then you have no food, and then you're surrounded by Grant. I mean, it's the writing's on the wall. It didn't matter. I mean,
Exactly.
I'm not sure in real time how much these guys knew was going on with that, but they knew. Lee certainly knew because he started taking off, heading out towards places like Sailor's Creek and Appomattox because they were chasing supply lines.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Exactly.
They weren't looking to fight. They were looking in trying to escape. They were trying to get supplies, and ultimately, at the end of the day, when they finally surrendered was because they ran out of supplies. The first thing Lee asked for was food for his men when they finally surrendered. And that's when Grant capitulated and got them food
Yep.
and took care of them, because that's how it was. This was the last days of the Confederate Empire, as they say. And what did Sherman say? Destroy the supplies, destroy their ability to make weaponry, deliver their supplies, deliver their food, and you got them. And that's why he didn't take Augusta, and that's why he didn't take Mobile, and that's why he didn't take these other places we've talked about in these recent podcasts, because you didn't have to.
Oh, we didn't
Why
have
are you
to.
going to siege a Vicksburg or an Atlanta when all you had to do was take out the trains that go around them, and then you got them, and then you got them.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think, Sherman doing war, this was clearly how he was talented in war, is this type of warfare. He was not his talent. I mean, yeah, he was very talented. He's one of the most talented US generals ever. But when it came to warfare, this was his talent, was waging war this way. Could General Thomas have done this type of warfare like Sherman? No. General Thomas was good with the battles, so was Grant. But Sherman, this is where he shone.
Well,
He's
Grant and Thomas are more go. They,
exactly.
it's especially Grant. I mean, you see Cold Harbor, you see these places. I mean, nobody like a full frontal like Grant, Mary. Okay, but Sherman was more into hitting the flank. He loved that left flank, go around him. If you're looking at sports, maybe he's a better general manager than he is a coach, right?
Exactly.
Um, but Sherman's great. Don't get me wrong.
Oh,
But
he
it's
is.
interesting. It's just interesting to show how it worked and how guys like even Howard realized that.
No,
You
it's
know,
interesting to see how Howard looks at Sherman in his memoirs, and we're kind of going off the rails here a little bit, but the part in Howard's memoirs where he talks when Howard goes west, and he sees Sherman and Grant meeting when Sherman finally gets to Chattanooga, and Howard writes about their friendship, and it's very positive. But he talks about how you could not have two more opposites being friends, including the way they fought. And that's when, Howard was like, yeah, he didn't do the battle thing very well, like not compare it, and Howard definitely saw Grant as being the talented man in that, as well as Thomas. Like he clearly had a lot of respect for all these men. he had a lot of respect for Sherman too. I mean, he's going to be Sherman's like pallbearer at his funeral, and he's also going to plan his funeral in 1891.
Mm-hmm. No, I think they gained a lot of respect for them. But you know
Mhm.
something? Is it really a bad thing to find ways to avoid fights and still win?
Absolutely not.
Right?
Who knows what lives were saved because of this march from, and I'm going to say it, Atlanta to Goldsboro. You know,
Atlanta. That's not what I heard the march started.
Ringgold Gap to
I
Goldsboro.
heard it was Ringgold Gap, someone told me. I was at the Dairy Queen in Kincardine one time and I overheard someone talk about it was Ringgold Gap, you know. But it's funny, you know, he wasn't, you know, as to Howard's point, he wasn't the most aggressive attacking guy at the end. But you know what though? He found a way to win. He won by taking away their will. He scared the hell out of the populace. He destroyed their supply centers. He put fear in people like Leonidas Polk, scared the crap out of Joseph Johnston,
Yep.
was able to win and keep his army for the most part intact. Now, listen, Sherman had a lot of shitty aspects of his life, especially for racial stuff.
Exactly.
I'm not going to sit here and tell you that he was, you know, whatever. But you can, people in the South, and I have these arguments when I travel down there. You can argue all you want about Sherman, but at the end of the day, he saved a lot of Southern lives. He really did. And you could look no further than Bentonville with Joseph Maurer, right?
Mm-hmm.
He could have chased them down. He would have had them on the run. It would have been like E.P. Alexander throwing those balls around there at the peach orchard. He could have hit them from behind, but he ultimately let them go. He caught them. He resupplied with Schofield, and then he basically got them to surrender peacefully, and that was the end of it.
Exactly.
And they all got, you know what? And they all got to go home anyway. And that was
And I
the end
think
of
that's
it.
what Johnson, that's all Johnson was searching for at that point, was just all we can hope for is I'll annoy him, but then we'll just look for the surrender, and that's what they wanted. He was on the same page as Hardy with that as well. And I think all of them were on that. We're done,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Speaking of done, I think we're done with this one, Mary.
We are.
So what's up next?
So next week a week from tomorrow night. Well, actually, no, we'll be dropping this on Saturday. So in just a few days, we will be having our St. Patrick's Day roundtable, which we're going to be doing things a little bit differently this time. So we're going to be having trivia that night, and we're going to be having some books to raffle off from the Abraham Lincoln Bookshop, which is located in Chicago, and they have a Facebook page. So go over and check that Facebook page out. They do a lot of great events around new Civil War and Abraham Lincoln books that are coming out. And that is thanks to Bjorn, who works there, that we have those books. So we're going to be giving those away for the winners of our trivia. And if you've never attended our roundtables before, send us an email, info@civilwarbreakfastclub.com, and we will send you the Zoom invite. And the episode that will drop a week from today is the Battle of Kernstown. So we will be talking about Stonewall Jackson.
And that's a fun one too. We're going to talk a little about old Stonewall. We're going to talk about Garnett and guys like that.
Yep.
And that's an interesting one because it's one that the Stonewall folks don't like to talk about, but we're going to talk about that. And we'll be talking about the Battle of First Kernstown, Mary.
Yes, we are. Is Kearney
First
there?
Kernstown. You know what? I have to look into it, but let's not ruin the surprise. I know we have Kearney fans who listen to this.
We do.
We're going to talk about a lot of these people just outside of Winchester, Virginia. So we're going to talk a little bit about this one. But I'm looking forward to it. So we have the round table of trivia. So we'll be doing our trivia stuff. So we're going to keep track of who's going to win. We're going to send them some books. To your point, we're going to send some stuff off and have a lot of fun. So when this drops on Saturday, you'll listen to this. Dress in green. Bring your libation. We will have fun. And we'll all spend St. Patty's Day together here at the Civil War Breakfast Club World Headquarters, and we will have a lot of fun as we prepare to talk about Kernstown as we head into episode 31, as we head towards 40.
Yep.
Well,
10 away. Ooh.
I know, but it's a lot of fun. So any final words from you, Octavia Howard?
Thank you everybody for listening and for all your support through these 30 episodes. It's hard to believe we're at 30 because it feels like we just started this yesterday. And huge shout out to Darren for being the amazing podcast partner to do this with. You really are. Yeah, you.
Okay, well, I guess I'm gonna get money now. Well, that's all for it, but I appreciate it. Hey, it takes two. It takes two. You are the best. You're the smartest person I know with this. I'll said it many times. But we definitely enjoy this. It's definitely a lot of fun. But we get to study on things like Kernstown and Bentonville and Pea Ridge and Meridian and stuff like that. It's a lot of fun. Plus, we get to hang out, and that's a lot of fun with it too.
Yeah, no, exactly. No, it's a lot of fun to hang out and, just be able to talk about this. And I've learned more in these last 30 episodes than probably the last few years that I've been studying the Civil War, because it's been kind of, not really forcing me, but I'm more into diving into it than I ever have before. And I really, really appreciate that. It's been awesome.
All right, so I guess we can put a bow on this one, as we can go off into the great beyond again. So again, thank you for everyone for listening to this. We really enjoyed 30 podcasts. Holy crap, 30 podcasts! As we'll go on to more things going forward. So any final words from you, the Queen of Kincardine?
See everybody on Saturday. Well, hopefully we'll see you in a few hours on our Facebook Live at 10 o'clock on Saturday.
Absolutely. So we're looking forward to that. So again, Mary, always a pleasure. Once again, I say many times, the pleasure is all yours. And we will look forward to talking to you on the other side.
See you guys later.
Peace out.